Great.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this very unique format for a public meeting, our public meeting number 2. Hopefully everybody can either see or hear what's going on. Hopefully everybody's healthy and safe. And on behalf of the county, we welcome you. My name is Dennis Canelli from T.Y. Lynn International, the project manager for the consultant team for the county by way of the Genesee Transportation Council. County representatives and GTC representatives are on the line or on the presentation. Mitch and Harriet and Jill and Bob, all representing the public side. We have our full consultant team here, and what we're going to do tonight is after these just a few opening remarks here, we'll go over the agenda, which is we will present our work to date, what we've done to date, including all the public participation work we've done in the field, work we've done with the steering committee, and then we'll go through some plans. Then we'll get into the consultant team's recommended alignment with alternatives to the steering committee and the county. And then we'll get into discussion and questions and answers and follow-on activities. So again, welcome everyone. And now I'm going to ask Tanya from Highland Planning to go over a few details here. Tanya?
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is Tanya Zwallen from Highland Planning. Can you go back one, Nate? So we're gonna talk a little bit about the webinar and how you can all participate in this meeting in a little bit greater detail before we get going. Then we'll get into the discussion, the details that Dennis mentioned. Next slide. So here's our advertisement for this meeting. And, you know, I think there's a few ways that you can comment and participate and provide comments to us. We wanted to provide this live opportunity for you to engage with us. We're going to run through the presentation and then we'll be opening it up for questions and comments. We also want to give people an opportunity to watch this presentation back later. So we're live streaming on YouTube and the video will be there after this meeting. And then there's a survey, which is live as of today. The link is here on the screen right now. And for those of you who are using your computers for Zoom, when you leave this meeting, you will have an opportunity to link and go right into the survey. There will be a blue button that says, "You're leaving Zoom to go to this Survey Monkey. Do you want to do that?" And then you'll hit the blue button to continue if you want to take the survey right now. You can also link to that survey after this meeting. So it's on the Seneca County Planning and Community Development website. And it will be open through May. I'm not seeing the date here. 10th, I think, is the date we decided on. Okay, next slide. Charvi's going to review the Zoom controls for tonight's meeting.
So as an attendee, you have a few Zoom controls and features that will help you throughout the presentation to participate. You can mute and unmute your audio. We would request you, if you're not speaking, please mute yourself for better audio clarity. You can submit your questions even during the presentation using the Q&A feature. That's in the control panel below your screen. You can also virtually raise your hand using the raise hand feature that's below your screen. If you're on the phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. Yeah, and we would request you if you can submit your email address when you're submitting a question using the Q&A feature. That will allow us to follow up with you individually if your question couldn't be answered during the presentation. Next slide. Tanya,
Yep, this is back to me. So I wanted to just review the public engagement that we've conducted to date on this project. The project kicked off in November 2019. And the first thing we did was meet with the steering committee for the project at Seneca County. And we interviewed a few key stakeholders and asked them what would be the best way to engage stakeholders and the public during this process. So we used their input and we developed a public engagement plan in November. And in the initial phase of the project, we had 3 meetings. We had a resident and stakeholder meeting on December 16th. Then we did a trail corridor walk on January 11th, which was a unseasonably warm, beautiful Saturday. And we had about, I think, 40 attendees at that meeting. And then finally, we had a public meeting on a regular old cold January night at the Waterloo Fire Hall. And so all 3 of those meetings were really focused on having a similar conversation. How do you use the trail today? What issues do you see? What opportunities do you see? And we spent a lot of time talking about potential trail alignments. And so tonight's meeting is intended to review what we heard specifically on issues and opportunities and alignments, and then share the preferred concepts or trail alignments with you.
All right, we'll run through real quick, kind of going backwards to show the purpose for the project. Here is a piece of the Erie County Canal-way trail map that shows the Seneca Lake to Cayuga Lake. Currently in green here on this slide, which is this piece, this is phase 1, which is currently active and is an active trail. Our piece for the project is to connect the phase 1 to the sculpture trail, which is here in the orange color. Here's an overall map, and the yellow area is the highlighted area for the planning study that we're doing here for the trail. The existing Cayuga-Seneca phase 1 trail is located here on the west side, and the existing sculpture trail here is on the east side of this map. We'll run through these real quick, but these are blow-ups of the existing property maps throughout the trail study area. This map shows the existing phase 1 trail that ends right here. And it basically leads you to the existing CS4 lock, which is owned by and maintained by Canals. The existing railroad here is in yellow. This is the way it used to run on this map. As we head to the east, we still show the railroad on the map and the canal and River Street. And this is the Waterloo container here. This is Distillery Avenue. Now we're down towards Gorham Street and the sewer plants. As we head further east, now we're at the Silver Creek Golf Club, which is right here. And as you can see, the railroad in its existing old alignment was running right along the canal at this point. Now we're up near the Waterfalls Bridge. At this point, the railroad kind of hugged right up against the road and got away from the canal a little bit. And it continues that way as we head further east, down near Sodders. And then at this point, this is Sodders grocery store here. The existing railroad main bed used to run in this direction, and this was another split off feed that ran over towards the Elks Club here. And then this is on this map, it's showing also the existing sculpture trail. We'll give a little bit of a picture of the sculpture trail, and here's a couple maps that shows its endpoint near the Elks Club. There is an existing trailhead parking here at this point. This is the existing trail alignment for the sculpture trail, which heads down near Veterans Memorial Bridge. And the last map for the existing properties shows the sculpture trail ending near Bridge Street and near the Women's Hall of Fame.
Okay, excuse me, Dennis back here again. This is a conglomeration map, if you will. When we first got started out in the field and working with the public, we focused on the west end because there were a number of potential options and potential obstacles of how to get from the end of the existing phase 1 trail and then start moving on to the east. So this just showed some of the summary of some of those issues, which we'll talk about a little later. I won't go over all of these now, but we use this as a basis to start formulating viable alternatives and recommended alternative in the end. Next slide, please. So based on all the work we've done, our consultant team with the public out in the field, with the steering committee, this shows a summary. All these different colors are summary of potential options for trail alignments that we have gathered and plotted on one single map. You don't have to focus on the colors right now, but Nate will go into this now in a little more detail on each of the maps that are a little more closer in. So go ahead, Nate.
Thanks, Dennis. So as Dennis was mentioning, this was a map that documented all the different trail options that everyone came up with during our public meetings to date. You know, a couple options is coming off of the existing trail bed here and heading down Huff Street and down kind of the existing railroad corridor. One option was to head north, more down into Waterloo and head towards Main Street and possibly back over the Gorham Street Bridge. And then there was a few more options, you know, down through this western end. Next map shows possibly continuing along East Main Street and jumping back over the Waterfalls Bridge. And another one is, again, continuing down kind of the existing railroad corridor in kind of the yellow, or trying to stay along the canal, which is one of the main purposes of the project, is to have the canal as close as, or the trail as close as we can to the canal. And then the last map shows, you know, possible configurations, you know, running along the canal bed itself, or taking some of the other pathways from the other railroad alignments and getting it over to the existing sculpture trail.
Okay, Dennis back here again, and now I'm going to run through 3 more map slides before we get started on any sort of questions and discussions. But based on all things we have heard and studied, and taking everything into the mix, all the public comments, the steering committee comments, our recommendations, we have a preferred alignment, and it does have alternatives, as I mentioned earlier. And then the pictures, hopefully everyone can see them as well, or if not, they will be available by way of other sources for those of you who don't have a screen. There's some keyed in photographs into different locations along the preferred trail alignment. So overwhelmingly, starting at the west end, We heard get back over to the canal. That was overwhelming. It's a natural draw to get over to the water and see the locks. And then from there, we would continue across Washington Street and up Huff Street. If you can hover there for a minute, Nate, the neighborhoods just between there and the canal, we couldn't make any viable options there because of the proximity of homes and docks and permitted land use along the canal, so that wasn't an option. So we proposed going up Distillery Ave toward the water container plant. And then the yellow again is the old railroad bed, which was the recommended alignment for the whole trail from the master plan. But we're fully aware there's some opposition to continuing down there, especially along Distillery Avenue and the homes just to the east. We recognize the petition that was submitted. So we took another hike back out in the field. And then the red alignment that goes through the container property and along an overhead transmission line. There's a nice clear path in there. But once you get to the east, we'll have to build some more structures, a culvert and a bridge to make the connection back over to Gorham Street. That is a viable option. It would require cooperation and permission easements from the current landowner, but it is a viable option. And what that would do is go around, if you will, a portion of the trail alignment, a potential trail alignment that would be in close proximity to some of the neighbors who are not in favor of an alignment in that direction. So then picking it up back from Gorham Street, heading to the east, we head past the treatment plant. Next slide, please, Nate. And then we can continue right along the canal fairly well, a combination of on the rail bed and just off the rail bed. There's a few culverts. Those of you who can see the screen, the color codes show some purplish, magenta, I guess it is, culverts. And then as we get to the Waterfalls Bridge, which is where Nate is hovering his cursor right now, there's a roadblock because of the way the bridge was rebuilt by the Department of Transportation. So what we'll have to do here is build a deck system similar to what is over at 96A that was recently constructed for phase 1. We can do something very similar. And as we head to the east, it's a wetland for several hundred feet. We would propose continuing with an elevated decking system. And then once we get onto dry land again, we would have a clear shot along the canal on the yellow line, if you can see that, versus the red line, which is where the old rail line was, until we get to DeVivi's property. Now, Mr. DeVivi, we've had discussions with him by way of the steering committee folks. He is not in favor of a waterside alignment based on his property, which he does own, because he owns waterfront property, wants to keep it that way. It's more valuable. So if that's not a viable option, which it doesn't seem like it is, we would have to scoot back out toward the road, toward River Road, and provide protection in the form of a guide rail or some other way to protect trail users and separate them from vehicles and other traffic on River Road. It's tight, but it's doable, and that looks like the way we have to go unless there's a purchase of the DeVivi property and some other change down in the future. Next slide, please, Nate. And then back past the DeVivi property, across from the Souders, we would be able to go back onto the yellow line, if you will, versus on the red line, which is the old rail line, along the old towpath. We could hug the canal pretty well. Again, our team has traversed every bit of this trail alignment on foot, so we know it's doable. And then to the Elks Club, we could hopefully get permission and cooperation from the folks that run the Elks property to stay along the canal. And then as we get toward the end at Sucker Brook, a new bridge would have to be built on the old foundations, hopefully, and where we would make the connection to the sculpture trail. One of the comments that we heard from the county and the steering committee is to make sure that there's a connection that could be provided back at Sodders for folks, whether they're on foot or on bike, whatever, to make a safe connection. And we would have to provide signage or possibly a flashing beacon for safe crossing, so people could go and have lunch or whatever they maybe need to do some shopping, because this is a transportation corridor for alternative transportation. So maybe that is the way they would be going to get their groceries or other supplies. So we would make accommodations for that in our study recommendations. And again, just a reminder, this is a planning study. We will finish up our work and make recommendations back to the county and the steering committee for what we would propose to move forward after we're completed with our report. So next slide, please, Nate. You want to take over?
Thanks, Dennis. This slide shows a couple different options. This is an example of the elevated wooden walkways that is under the 96A bridge, and this would be an example of a type that could be constructed out at under the Waterfalls Bridge and through some of the adjacent wetlands. Also on this slide shows some privacy fencing for examples. Say if we're in close proximity to residential neighborhoods or commercials that we would need to separate the trail, we could utilize this fence, or also some tree plantings, arborvitaes. The last little blow up on this slide is the trail typical section. The plan is to have the trail to be 8 feet minimum, with desire for 10 feet wide for use by pedestrian and bicycle use. And basically the goal is to have it to be as ADA compliant as possible.
Next slide, please, Nate. So next steps. Obviously, we're still very anxious for further engagement with the public in the survey, and any comments. There's a variety of ways that those comments can come in, and every comment will be addressed and responses will be provided and incorporated into our work going forward, which includes finalizing our field work. Our other parts of our team are our bridge design folks who are examining the various crossings to make sure there's viable ways to either reuse some of the existing foundations, or if we need new bridges or bridge replacements, that will be part of our study conclusion with cost estimates. Our partners at the LA group, our landscape architects who have been out in the field, they're providing their expertise on moving forward on some of the detailing of our planning study. So then we will finalize our alternatives recommendations to the county and the steering committee, and then we will provide a draft report first for review and comment by the county and the steering committee before we finalize everything going forward when we submit the report this coming spring. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tanya and Charvi to get some discussion going.
Great. So just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted onto the Seneca County Planning and Community Development page. There's an online survey that's open now and will be open through May 10th. You can also contact the project manager, Harriet Haynes. Her email address is provided here. But it is 6:26, so we have more than a half an hour to hear from you all who are participating by computer or by phone. So you can unmute your phone and ask a question, or you can type a question into the Q&A box, and there's also a chat box. So you can use any of those methods? Does anyone have
I'm not sure how to.
There you are, Rick.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Okay, I was trying to figure it out. So, you said the trail is got to go in front of the Vivies. It's going to be by the road.
At this point, that would be the option that we would have to go with, because he would not support crossing his property again, which he owns, if it was on the canal side.
How did he get to own the railroad bed? And like when I bought my property, I live on Distillery Ave. I thought that railroad property was part of the property I bought. How did he get some railroad property, and all those people that bought our houses here on this didn't get any of this railroad property?
I'll have to defer to the county on that question. I can't answer that.
Okay, I was just wondering because I would have thought twice if I knew they were going to develop that railroad bed when we moved here. You couldn't even tell there's a railroad bed here except for that old bridge that crosses a canal across that little creek here. And I would have never thought in the past 10 years I lived here 15 years, I would have never thought ever of anybody ever putting something in through there.
We've got one other question coming in through the Q&A. Sue asked, when will the Elks Club be contacted for permission?
We will be following up with the Elks Club following this meeting, so very soon.
Everyone seems very quiet to ask questions. So this is Sue Fegley. My husband's Douglas. We own property that is going to be bordering this canal pathway if it goes through where you are proposing at the moment. So some of my concerns, yes, you started to address those this evening. I know that you're trying to get through the small hamlet of Waterloo and all of our landowner properties that are going to be bordering this. You have skirted around part of the old railway properties by getting off onto the roads, by going onto Huff Street. So all the people from phase 1 over to across Washington Street to Huff, none of those landowners are affected at all because you're skipping around the railroad bed. And I know you want to stay on the railroad bed or as close to the railroad bed and the canal as possible as you go through this phase 2 process. Of course, you've heard all of our concerns with coming so close to our properties. And if you don't even have the Elks Club's permission yet to come through their property, which I'm sure they own water frontage also, because I do believe there's a dock out there. Like Mr. DeVivy has waterfront property apparently. I would have thought that this permission, or you would have already spoken to the Elks to know from Lodovico Trail coming east to west that all of that was a viable way to go, to come all the way to the sewage treatment plant and then work your way through this small little hamlet of Waterloo to get through the neighborhood. So my concerns are still, how are we getting connected and going through? You're going to build the bridge or the decking underneath Waterfalls Bridge. Is all of this within the cost of what you have asked for this project? All of the bridges that need to be built, the decking, if you're going to put decking from Waterfalls Bridge back onto dry land down by the canal there, all of these little bridges and the deckings for everything are covered in the cost that you've already procured for this project?
This is Dennis. No, there's many facets to that comment and question. But first of all, this is a study, and when we go forward with our report, we will prepare a cost estimate. There is no construction money yet. At the conclusion of the study, we would identify the proposed cost estimates to match what the preferred alternative recommendation would be. So there is no money, there is no project yet. This is a study. So we would complete a comprehensive cost estimate as part of the conclusion of the study, and then help the county try to find ways to possibly get funding for the project. So there is no project yet. Again, this is a planning study only.
Dennis, I have a follow-up question to that came through the Q&A. If approved, and so if funding is received, when would building begin?
I would defer to the county on that. Certainly, there's complications now with the coronavirus in the scheduling of applications for funding. There's additional funds being spent by the state, by the federal government, so that's kind of in limbo right now, as far as what sources of funding could be had and the timing of such. So we would have to meet with the county and have discussions about that before we could provide a real answer.
So the answer is once Seneca County identifies funding and once the trail is designed. Is that right?
Would be, but I couldn't tell you if it's next year, the year after, or whenever. The whole project would need to be approved before it could be. There could be a schedule for design or construction.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And as far back to the question, Ms. Fegley, about the Elks Club, I believe that there is an easement across the canal side of that property. Whether they are using that property or not, it's my understanding that the easement exists, that they do not own the property. But of course, that's going to all be verified going forward.
Okay.
Another question, will there be parking areas along the new trail?
There have been a couple of areas identified for potential parking. One of them being at there's space at the treatment plant that have been discussed, and as part of our work sessions at prior public involvement stages that's been discussed. But there's nothing definitely as part of our recommendation yet. At the west end, there's parking at the old DOT facility and adjacent to the canal. So there's plenty of parking there. We would just have to make sure that that was still viable, depending on property ownership as it goes forward. Those are the two natural places, I think. But again, it's a transportation corridor. It's a continuation. Folks could get easily to the trail from Seneca Falls or Waterloo, or from the existing neighborhoods along the trail. Nate, did you have anything to add on that for parking areas that have been examined?
Yeah, look, Dennis, go back to the other thought is, and being out here is possibly widening the, show it on with my cursor here, widening and making the existing parking area near the sculpture trail a little bit bigger. Right now you can fit maybe 2 or 3 cars. It'd be nice if you could do 4 or 5, maybe 6. I think there's space in there. So I think that's an option. And like you said, going back to, possibly doing a parking area here on the east side of the sewage plant, or possibly a small one or on the east side or the west side or on this side.
Thanks, Nate.
So, okay, thank you. Harriet has shared, and so this is for Rick, who I think is just joined by phone, that the Elks do not own to the waterfront. I believe they are using that space with a permit from the Canal Corporation. DeVivi negotiated directly with the owners of the old railroad bed directly, and there was not county involvement in that sale. Also related to land ownership, we have a question from William Cook. On the subject of landowners, have the Waterloo container owners been contacted? Any opposition, as in with the DeVivi lands?
The owners of the container properties have been part of our public participation process at various stages. They have not shown any opposition at this point. Obviously, we would have to carry those conversations further as we go forward toward completion of the study.
Thank you. Another question from Sue Fegley. If landowners wanted privacy from the trail, who is providing the money to cover the cost?
As part of our study conclusions and recommendations, if we felt there were some screening areas warranted, we would recommend that those be part of the project. That would be part of the mitigation of any potential impacts to residents. So that's all part of what would be the trail proposed alternative scope of work that we would recommend back to the county.
Okay. And then William Cook is asking, regarding the installation of either a hard barrier or natural planting, what is the proximity to the trail one would have to be in to get a barrier?
That would partially depend on the topography and the proximity of other features, but typically you want at least 3 feet clear from the edge of the trail to any other feature. Thanks, Nate. So as you can see, well, those of you who can see from a typical trail section, you would want a minimum of 3 feet from the outside edge of the trail to any signage, any sort of planting, trees, fencing, barriers for safety, so that there's elbow room, if you will, between the trail and any other physical feature, which we would call a clear zone.
I do not see any other questions right now.
I just have a concern.
Is that Rick?
Can I speak? Yes, can I speak for a moment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, being a neighbor to this Waterloo container plant over here, every day on Distillery Ave, their Distillery Ave, the tractor trailers go up and down that road all day long, turning around, K-turning. And I think some of your guys that were here looking at the bridge, seeing the traffic that they get over there. A lot of traffic coming down that road with them tractor trailers on to the Waterloo container.
Yes, understood.
So that means the trail would have to almost go over even farther off the road, unless the kids are going to be riding bicycles down there or something. All those tractor trailers up and down them streets. See, a little safety concern, I thought.
Yes, understood and agreed. Thank you.
I have another question coming in from William Cook. To clarify the barrier question, how close would the trail easement have to be to private property to be considered for screening? How close would the trail easement have to be to a private property?
Well, it depends partly on the width of the existing easement that the trail would go into. And again, we would want to have that buffer, again, 3 feet off the edge of a trail, whether it be an 8-foot wide trail or a 10-foot wide trail. And then if, for instance, if there was going to be trees like arborvitaes or something that would grow, we would have to consider what the growth of those trees what do they spread out to be, to make sure they didn't encroach on any property. Unless there's an easement requested for to accommodate some sort of screening or other feature of the trail, we would need permission, and that would have to go through the formal acquisition process for additional easement if that was needed. So there's not a hard and fast number, but we would, any public project can't encroach on private property without due process and obtaining an easement or purchase of additional land. So sort of a roundabout answer, but that's the best I can do. We can't encroach on private property.
Dennis, I have one question.
Yes.
Previously in a couple of the other meetings, it was mentioned instead of going down Distillery Ave, that you go to the end of Huff Street and go around, turn the corner there and stay by River Road to get down towards the sewage treatment plant. I don't see that as a possibility at all. And I'm certain that Dan Fegley gave permission to use that property along that section of land that he owns for the trail to head that direction. Not even considered anymore?
At this point, this is our recommendation, and based on some other feedback we've gotten from the public involvement process was that it was not desired. Again, talking majority, not every single person, of going along River Road based on speed, width of the roadway, offset from roadway to potential trail, limited right-of-way, all those things. So the needs and objectives of the project is really geared toward trying to stay as close to the canal as possible and away from the roadways as much as possible, and especially having the trail adjacent to the roadway, which is, again, these are our recommendations based on all things considered that we've heard and the work we've done with the steering committee, the residents, our design team. And the same reason we don't recommend going up Washington Street and over to the north side, over to Route 20 and Main Street and down that way. But again, I keep stressing, this is a study. These are our recommendations that would need to be carried forward to the county for consideration and approval.
Yes, and I understand all that, Dennis. I guess what I'm hearing now is your recommendation, as you have found through the study, is what is going to be proposed and recommended. So that is more than likely what we can expect to actually happen. So if that is your proposal to the county, whatever committees you're going to be proposing this to, this is probably what we can expect to see then actually happen when it comes time to build, even though this is just in the study phase. I guess that's part of what most of us are feeling right now.
I would jump in and say that I think hearing from you, your comments tonight, and what responses we get from the survey are absolutely going to be considered.
Okay.
This process is not over yet.
Okay, we're just concerned, and we are hoping that our concerns are heard. And at this point, we're just feeling like, yeah, this is the study, and this is what will be proposed, and that's the way it's going to go.
No, and I think, in my opinion, hopefully others agree that we've spent a considerable amount of time with public involvement and participation and listening, and for instance, that's why we have come up with an alternative. Excuse me? Go ahead, Rick.
I was just calling my wife to the phone so she could hear. We don't have a computer. I just wanted her to hear more comments on this.
No, what Tanya and I were both saying is none of this is a done deal. We think we've spent a lot of time with public participation and walking in the field, having meetings, having West End meetings. We've definitely heard the concerns, and every comment is taken into consideration. It's absolutely a fact. So there's no done deals here.
And that's been our direction by the county, is to do that and to continue listening through this process. I've got a question. This is William Cook. Third attempt here to get an answer out of us. If a private landowner adjacent to the trail requests screening, how is it considered? Sorry to keep asking, trying to clarify my question. Maybe you should tell us your address so we could look at it. Yeah. I don't know if you want to put that on a public webinar, but you could also send an email to Harriet Haynes and she could let us know, or you could mention it in the survey if you don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, and we have it jotted down here as well. So yeah, if we can zero in on any particular locations, that would be very helpful.
49 East River Road, just east of Distillery Ave.
Very good.
Might as well check everybody out too. Might as well check everybody else out too, right? In case everybody else wants a, fence up or something.
Well, that section of Distillery and River Road is really tight. So, yeah.
And Dennis?
I know.
Sorry, Rick.
No, that's okay.
Dennis,
I was just going to blurt about. Oh, go ahead.
If there are buildings or fences or obstructions along this trailway from people who've owned properties, not knowing that a trail may come through on the railroad bed, what will be happening to those structures or fencing with those property owners?
Each property owner would have to be approached individually if a potential alignment was going to be in close, quote unquote, right on top of their property. And we know there's a few. And when we were looking at the West End, there are some structures right over the top of the old railroad bed, which is part of an easement that still exists. So we realize the reality of some of the proximity issues of a potential alignment, and that's part of the reason we've tried to come up with alternatives that avoid those situations as much as possible.
I don't have any open questions on the Q&A, and I don't see anything in the chat.
I just got one more gripe, if I can just pipe in for a second, one more time. Now, if that trail goes through where you're proposing through the railroad bed, there's like a wall of big trees, and which is privacy for everybody along this trail. And all those trees are going to be mowed out, and we're going to have them replaced with little bushes. I know you can't replant big trees, but I mean, for all us neighbors and stuff, they've got all these big trees on this railroad bed. Once all those trees come down, it's wide open.
Well, if there was a part of the railroad bed where a trail would go, there would have to be some clearing. Yeah, absolutely. Mowing down all the trees, that's certainly not anybody's intention. So, again, every section will have to be evaluated individually. But if a trail was to be built along the old railroad bed and where the trees have grown, there would be some clearing, yes.
So we would just have to suffer with losing our view and all our privacy. We wouldn't, no compensation or anything.
Compensation, again, if it was on private property, that would have to be dealt with by way of an easement or permission or purchase of land, if that's the way it was going to go. Again, we have our landscape architects on the job. They've been out in the field. They're going to recommend screening options in certain locations of our recommendations or whatever recommendations that the county asks us to move forward with. So we can't get specific right now until we have all of our data in hand and all of our work completed by our team.
I have a few questions
Okay.
coming in on the Q&A. Does anyone know if NYSEG has any utilities currently on the railroad bed?
I believe there's a few crossings. I don't think there's anything along the full length of the railroad bed.
And then another question, in the areas where you are leaving the railroad bed, is there permission from the canal or other landowner?
Well, the easement exists on the old railroad bed. Any deviation at each individual property owner would have to be approached for permission or an easement to construct any sort of a trail.
So going east from the Watersfall Bridge, where you're getting away from the railroad bed and staying down by the canal, who are the landowners of that?
It varies. Part of it is probably Canal Corp. Some is on the easement area. Some is by NYSEG. So again, we would have to plot all those plans and approach each individual property owner if there was an easement that needed to be put in place.
Okay.
Harriet is saying the Canal Corps owns east of the bridge, except railroad NYSEG. Does that make sense?
What I was stating was that except for the old railroad bed, which is owned by NYSEG, that the east of the bridge are Canal Corp properties.
Thank you, Harriet.
Mm-hmm.
It's 6:54. We've got a few more minutes left.
Tanya, will there be another meeting before this proposal, or when are you actually proposing this? I may have missed the date on what the proposal.
Dennis, do you mind answering that one?
No, we are going to finish up our field work and address all of our recommendations in a preliminary report and submit that to the county for review and comment. And incorporated into the report will be all responses to these comments. And if another public meeting is deemed necessary at this point, we'll schedule one.
Okay, and when do you plan to submit? When are they expecting this submittal?
We're good. We're working on the report now. We're working on our field work, and it will be submitted within the next, probably within a month from now.
Thank you.
Maybe we should have one more meeting where we all can see each other.
Hopefully that will be
Before.
sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, after this shutdown is over with, maybe we should have another meeting just to get everything all, because this phone thing is kind of tough for me to talk when I can't see somebody, you know? I don't know who I'm talking to.
We see you, Rick. We see you.
And Rick, I know your voice anywhere.
Yep.
I think we'd like, because I know you don't have a computer, we'd like to get you a set of the alignment. So stick one in the mail to you there. I think everybody else has been able to see it, and it is available on the county's website as well. I want to remind everybody, it's we're getting close here at 6:56. I want to remind everyone that when you leave the meeting, so in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, for those of you who are using Zoom on a computer, there will be an option after you leave. There'll be a message that says, "Thank you for attending the webinar. Please click continue to participate in a short survey." That's not your only chance to participate in the survey, but if you want to submit your comments right now, you'll have a chance to when you leave the meeting. But you can also access that survey from the county's Planning and Community Development website. And I think Finger Lakes One also advertised this meeting, and they might have a link as well. And if you have any questions or trouble finding the survey, send a note to Harriet Haynes and we'll make sure you get it.
Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah, thank you all for participating. So we ended up with 16 participants, which I think is pretty good for a Wednesday night during a pandemic. So I'm really grateful for you all joining us and participating. I think this worked really well.
Yeah, indeed. I think we made the best of a difficult situation, and a special thanks to Highland Planning, Tanya and Charvy and her team for making this happen. They're the tech wizards that put this unique situation, made the best of it. So thank you to you guys, and especially thank you to the county and the GTC representatives and all the residents for joining in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a good night. Stay safe.
Yes, you everybody too. Be safe. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.